Today, we are going to be discussing all things horror in cinema. I am your host, Kage.
Neff.
Buttons.
Yep, and we're going to talk about some stuff. So, 2024 is looking to be a big year for horror. February, unfortunately, not speaking in horror specifically, but February is very light in terms of movies we want to see. But looking overall at the year of 2024, we have quite a bit. Right here, I have a list in front of me. I said Quiet Place Day One, The First Omen, Alien Romulus, The Crow, Return to Silent Hill, and Nosferatu. So maybe. Right. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so definitely got a lot of stuff coming in the pipeline. And that being said, there's really not a lot of information given about these films in terms of release dates. It's
True.
all of it is basically said to come out in 2024 in this general time, in this quarter. Like, that's the most information we have, unfortunately. Me personally, I am a big horror buff, but not just any horror buff. I like, and I would love to hear the opinion of my co-hosts, as well as you out there in the comments. Me personally, I tend to gravitate towards paranormal horror, slow burn movies, okay? I've said before in other episodes, I am a big fan of origin stories, and paranormal horror scratches that itch for me because you have an entity, you have an ancient story, and it talks about, you got movies that talk about Pennywise, the history of it, for example. You get this history of what's been going on, how long this thing has been doing this, and no one's been able to stop it. Those are the things that really draw my attention. I like those movies that stick with you when the credits are done. When you need to watch Lilo and Stitch at the end of your horror movie, you just watched something pretty special.
Right.
I'm not really big on slasher films. I respect them. Okay, I want to make that very clear. Jason, Freddy Krueger, Hellraiser, those boogeyman movies where you got just some unkillable thing that's always coming after a dumb group of teenagers or whatever. We've seen it time and time again. They're a good time, but they don't have soul to me. Okay,
They don't stick with you.
They don't really stick with me because I've seen the same dumb kills for 20 plus years. For me, I like the slow burn movies that stick with me. And there's a lot of films to name off here, but I think two of the biggest ones to me as for a slow burn would be The Grudge and The Ring. Those are films that show you the scary thing ever so often, and then by the time you get to the end, you now know what this thing is. There's no mystery, there's no interpretation. It's not a shadow, like they show you little glimpses. It's a shadow in the corner, a noise over here, or something like that, and they slowly, gradually reveal it to you. By the time the movie comes to its final act, you know what this thing is. You know how dangerous it is. You know how long it's been doing its thing. And the movie ends, and now you're on Wikipedia going, well, what is this thing? What's the lore? And where can they go? And you start speculating, and those are the characteristics that make a good horror movie, in my opinion. I've never went online and looked up the lore of Jason, of Freddy Krueger, because he drowned in Crystal Lake. How many times are you going to tell me that story?
Interesting.
He killed somebody in a sleeping bag. We're not going to talk about Jason X. I think that should be a comedy at this point, but stuff like that. But guys, please share with me. Neff, where do you stand on horror? What movies are there? Any movies of those lists, or maybe something else that you would like to see?
Well, I like the list that you had. I agree with those. I think the most anticipated for me is probably A Quiet Place Day One. I want to see what they do with that, and I've talked about it before. But as far as horror, I didn't see too much that really popped out to me that was like, oh, I need to go see that in horror. I know like Terrifier 3 is out there, but if people have not watched Terrifier 3, that movie's a little different. It's a little extreme. It's not for everybody. So I probably wouldn't advise people to go see that unless they do their research on that first, because that's not a nice movie. If people think Saw is bad, Terrifier 3 is Saw and crack cocaine. But anyway, yeah, like I said, I agree with what Kage had. A lot of those movies on that list, I'm probably going to go see. Excited for. As far as horror movies that I like, John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yes, yes, very good.
Like I said, I've talked about Insidious before. I like Insidious a lot. I like the Annabelle series.
Same.
I like Scream. I like Scream a lot because not only is it a teen slasher, but it's a movie that it has that cheesy late 90s, 2000s nostalgia that I like.
Yeah.
And also I think Scream really balances out comedy, horror, and like suspense at the same time. And it has one of the most, I guess, noticeable villains of all time with Ghostface there. Me and Kage have had many talks about Ghostface.
Yes.
NetherRealm, put him in Mortal Kombat, please.
Please.
But anyway, yeah, those are just a couple. Of course, there's a lot more I probably can't think of right now, but those are a few. Like I said, I want to see what happens with these movies that come out, in the year. I want to see if they're good quality. I want to see if they actually make money, because I think that Hollywood may pivot and start focusing on horror films because they can have that lower budget and have that higher return. But that's just my thoughts on it. Those are a couple movies that I like. Of course, there's more. Probably didn't hit everything, but I'll pass it off to Buttons.
So as far as, I'll start with, movies that I'm looking forward to this year. I do think that there's a pretty good selection. Most of the time for me with the horror movies, there's maybe only one or two good ones that catch my interest as far as going to go see in theaters. Across what comes out on streaming services is different, but I am excited for Imaginary, Abigail,
Ooh, yeah.
Quiet Place, Beetlejuice 2, which you could make the argument that it's not a true horror film, but it does fall within that category. And then, of course, Nosferatu. And that one came on my radar kind of later on. I didn't see a whole lot about it, and I think that's probably because it's not slated to come out to December. That's if it does get released this year.
That's the question mark movie.
So it might get pushed into 2025. But I'm always been a sucker for creepy kids. Like that gets it for me. And that's why I've got Imaginary and Abigail on there, because they got the creepy kids. Hey, what happens when you stop playing with your imaginary friend, and hey, what happens with a little kid vampire, So we're falling into that same realm of those type of horror movies. And I will say this about horror movies: I grew up being terrified, didn't like horror movies when I was younger, and then I grew to appreciate them later on.
Makes sense.
Now I enjoy a good horror movie, and I can laugh at a cheesy horror movie and not have any problems.
Yeah.
Like I'll sit down and be like, hey, you know what? I love my comedy horrors, and Scream for me is one of those where it's like, yeah, when I watched the first one, I was kind of scared, but then I was like, no, but this is also funny. I'm laughing at the same time, going, what, this is ridiculous. Why are you doing this?
Right.
Why did you go into the garage? Why did you try and fit through the cat door? Why are you doing this? And movies that are able to deliver on those jump scares and that suspense build, to truly scare you, but then also give you that comedy angle. I love those movies. A perfect example for me was Happy Death Day. That one's a more recent one.
I know about that.
They've done two of those. Hey, I would definitely go see a third one, just because even though, they're not the best, they have a great balance.
Right.
And that to me makes for just an overall enjoyable experience. If I sit down and I watch, and I'm just going to throw like Paranormal Activity out there, you're sitting down, and for the first hour of this movie, you get hints, you get little glimpses. You're just like, oh, look, the thing moved, and nobody was moving it. Or, you don't really truly see anything scary as of yet until like the last like half hour, then everything is, going on, and you're like, oh, now I get it.
Right,
like
right,
now
right.
here's the horror part. Here's me being scared. So I mean, they have their place for me, but those are not usually my meat and potatoes. Now, I do like a good poltergeist movie, and that is one of my favorites.
Good.
And so, I do like that kind of stuff. And I think over the years, some of the better ones that we've had are Insidious and the Conjuring movies, and even Sinister, and Hereditary was another
Yes,
good one
yeah,
that I
yeah.
enjoyed. But I do think that if you want to just absolutely scare the pants off of yourself, there's not going to be anybody who's going to do it better than Korea. I'm sorry. I don't know if you've ever looked into the history of the horror movies that we've made here in the States. A lot of them are direct replicas of Korean movies. The Grudge and The Ring are perfect examples of that. Those are not American films. Those are remakes.
Those are Japanese.
There's
films.
so one is Korean and one is Japanese. I believe The Grudge was Japanese.
Ju-on.
Yes, Ju-on, and I believe The Ring was Korean. But we also have like all of these movies that are horror because of their creature flicks.
Right.
And those ones, have their own place. And I can tell you right now, you make fun of me if you want, but I was like a little kid when I saw Jurassic Park the first time, and it scared the crap out of me. All right. And those are animatronic dinosaurs, and they still scared the crap out of me.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Kage's probably going to correct me here on my Korean thing, but I have watched some other Korean ones like Audition and The Stairs, and those ones are going to scare the crap out of you if you haven't seen them.
Interesting.
So if you are looking for some of that kind of foreign influence and kind of see how they do things to scare you, I would definitely recommend if you can find those.
Interesting.
They hold up well even over the years. I am not a big fan, I will say, of any of the ones that are pure gore.
Agreed.
And that would be like Human Centipede.
Right.
I think probably everyone in this group can agree with me on that one, that movie just was too much.
Yeah.
You saw it?
No. I just mean.
I was about to say.
The premise.
Am I
The premise
judging?
of
I
it
saw
was-
the trailer, and that was
You
enough.
said no thanks.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow up with Buttons there. A couple more that I'll throw out there. The Shining, Event
on my list.
Horizon. I think Oculus is an extremely underrated movie.
On my list.
That's just a couple that I'm throwing out there. A few will probably hit me. You have something, Kage?
Well, I'll say a couple things. So, I just learned something, and it's not a jab at you, Buttons. It's not. I promise. Because I agree with you. Whenever you have a foreign horror film and it's remade for America, a lot of times, if you go back and look at the source material, there's stuff even America won't touch. You are absolutely right. There is some dark stuff in Asia in terms of horror. Now, I just looked it up. I learned something. The Ring was based on a Japanese novel. I didn't know there was a novel.
Okay.
So now I'm going to go look it up. Hopefully they have a translation version, because I definitely want to see the original story. I will say this, though, for anybody that didn't know, it's funny because Ju-on, aka The Grudge in Japan, it was a hit over there. But the Japanese directors actually gave props to the American version and said that our version is better than theirs. Even though they made multiple movies or whatever, they're like, they think ours is scarier. And I've seen a lot of behind the scenes of them talking about that.
Yeah, and Kage, I cannot let you forget this. I don't know if you said Silent Hill.
Okay, so yes, thank you.
It's on your list of favorites.
Yeah, so there's a movie hopefully it's going to come out again. We don't have any hard dates, but it says 2024, Return to Silent Hill. So as I've said before, I am a gamer, always have been, always will be. A big fan of the Silent Hill mythos, so to speak. I've played some of them here and there, but I've done a lot of Wikipedia. Like, this is an example of horror that I'm like, I gotta know more, and I'm on Wikipedia, I'm on Reddit, subreddits, looking stuff up. The normally video game adaptations suck. There's no nice way to say it. They just suck, and I'm not talking about horror, but just video game movies in general. They've gotten better over the years. Back in the day, we had Street Fighter, we had Super Mario in the 90s.
Ninja Turtles.
That's classic. Nothing can touch that. Nothing can touch Ninja Turtles. But yeah, like Silent Hill is very near and dear to my heart. You play the game. It's it's a slow burn game, honestly. And the first movie that came out in 2016, directed by Christoph Gans, he had to go to Konami and say, I have this idea for a movie that I want to base on your game. And he got the blessing of the people that made it. And you got to think about that. There's a lot of studios out there, movie studios, that take an IP and they do their own thing. I think the biggest offender would be the, not horror, but Avatar, The Last Airbender. When that got announced, everybody was so excited. Oh my God, I cannot wait to see a live action movie of this. And it was unanimously hated. I don't know a single soul who said that was a good movie. And to add insult to injury, there have been many interviews, you can look it up for yourself online, where the creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender said they weren't asked, they weren't on set, they weren't asked, they weren't involved.
Yeah.
And there you go. So that's an example
It's a
of
disconnect.
Right, you need to respect the spirit of the material. And in the case of Silent Hill, that's big. Mm-hmm. They went to Japan and said, hey, this is what we have an idea for. And Japan and Konami was like, we like what you're doing. Yeah, go ahead and make that movie. So that movie did really well. It pulled monsters right out of Silent Hill. For those that don't know, all the screwed up stuff that you see in Silent Hill, all of those monsters, it's not your traditional monsters.
Gotta love Pyramid Head.
Pyramid Head, right. And people are, and the thing is, if you're not a gamer, you're going to watch this movie and go, what the hell is that thing?
Which is what everyone playing the game was thinking too.
Well, yeah, but like you have for the 2016 version, you had the nurses with skin-tight uniforms that were made of skin, and they have no faces. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, they pulled this imagery right out of the games.
Right.
Each monster, Pyramid Head included, everything you see, they're not demons, they are physical manifestations of the human psyche. And that's what fascinates me. That's deep. I don't know too many movies that are doing that. Mm-hmm. Do you?
Not too many. I'd have to do some deep digging. I can't think of off top.
Yeah. Like, off top of my head, I don't know.
What do you guys think as far as horror franchises? And we've discussed this before. How long do you think these should last? Do you think it should be trilogies? Do you think it should be maybe 2 films? What do you think is a nice sweet spot for these movies? Because we've seen a lot of franchises, as far as horror goes, go a long time. Conjuring's one of them, Insidious is one of them. But they do make good money, and the movies are decent. So what do you guys think? I'll start with Buttons here.
Yes.
All right, so, honestly, I don't know if there's a perfect sweet spot for horror movies, just because, each one, depending on what the background information is, you could sit there and make the argument of, you could take deeper dives, or you could expound, unlimited into what drives the horror aspect of it, franchises like Alien, we've seen where they've fallen off over the years with their content. And, you know, for the fans of the original trilogy, I would say they probably think that it should have stopped with 3.
Interesting.
And, you know, there's other people who are like, yeah, no, they're at least they're trying. They're still putting out content, and they might not hit the mark every time, but the content is still interesting, or it still expounds upon the world of it. So we're engaged and we're interested to see what they do next. I know we've discussed before, like Prometheus, for example. Some people liked it, some people didn't, and that, you know, that makes it really hard for these studios that are putting out these horror films to recoup that money to make more content. And, you know, obviously when you have these actors and actresses that get tied to these roles in these movies, it does make it difficult for these sequels to continue because they're asking more money. And, you know, sometimes it's a drop in the bucket for some of these films when you're talking about the production budget, but other times it is the biggest chunk of their budget. You know, because going all the way back to probably the golden age of horror movies, they were using tinfoil and strings and, you know, to build these elaborate creatures or to make the effects. And, you know, again, horror movies go all the way back to silent films. You know, one of the original Draculas was a silent film, and so, I mean, you were able to do all the things, and all they had was black and white, and there was no special effects involved in that. It's like, oh, here's a creepy hand. So, I mean, it's like costumes and makeup, and that was their special effects. You know, maybe somebody shut the door off screen, but then you can kind of see their hand down in the lower corners. You know, but as we've gone forward and we've given them these bigger budgets, it's amazing to see what they're able to do with the more money and with the development of the technology. For me, the franchise thing to me really just is, what's the story? Is the story getting crazy, outrageous, ridiculous, Jason in space? I mean, what's the I mean, you got Pinhead in space. Leave Pinhead, you know, Hellraiser, whatever, you know.
Hellraiser's a good one. Hellraiser 5's a guilty pleasure of mine. I love Hellraiser 5.
But, you know, I mean,
Reverse the other Cenobites.
I mean, did we have to put Jason in space? That's my question. Was it necessary? What did we gain out of that? I mean, was somebody just like, all right, guys, space is really hot right now. Let's go ahead. Who can we throw in space?
When
Let's
did
put
Jason X come out? Was that early 2000s?
I think so.
That was that Lost in Space era.
Yeah.
I'm telling
you said
you.
that. Listen, I jabbed at it before, and I'm glad.
you,
I'm
bro.
glad there's other people that know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Jason X was hilarious.
Jason X was so funny and so stupid. All I remember was him in space. Oh, and you see him outside the window, and it's like you can't take it seriously. But it's one of those guilty pleasures.
It's like a sci-fi
you know?
movie.
It's
One of those early 2000s sci-fi movies.
It's one of those so bad it's good. I'm not gonna go out and buy it, but if it's a rainy day and it comes
I'll
on
watch
TV,
it. Why
I'll watch
not?
such stupid stuff. I'll turn my brain off for a minute.
What do you think, Kage, as far as franchise and how long they should run?
Ultimately, that really depends on what Button said, the story. Me personally, I feel like no more than 2. But my exception to that are
Saw.
well, yeah, it's the best. No, my exception to that 1 and 2 sequel would be Boogeyman films. So Boogeyman films like Jason, like Freddy, like a scary thing that's pursuing a group of people and killing them off one by one that we've seen for 30 plus years now. Those types of films, okay, I'm okay with, because the draw is, okay, we're not really looking too deep into the story. What's the group of setting? What's the time period? Let's get a group of young people to be in this, and we're going to kill them off one by one. That's your movie. Go. And you watch those movies, same for the Saw. What are the kills going to be? You know what I mean? And those movies, you're not watching for the lore, you're not watching for the story, you're just watching it, turn your brain off. You're watching it for what it is. It's just dumb fun. And that's why those movies are okay to go on for as long as they have. But for me, the sweet spot would be 1 to 2, those short stories that stick with you after the credits roll. Again, you have Silent Hill and Return to Silent Hill coming by the same director who did the same thing, went to Konami, got their blessing to make another film. So hopefully we see that later this year. The Ring and The Ring 2, The Grudge. Now, The Grudge had 3 American films, but they should have made 1 and 2. The first movie is the meat and potatoes, like kind of talking about the history of where Kayako came from and what's going on. And the second one gives a little more backstory. Why is she doing this? Why is she hell-bent on taking out every single person that comes in her house type thing? So that's fascinating. But then you got those movies that are just one and done, just one good story. And I think the thing that I like about horror films is you have cheaper production costs and the whole concept of less is more. You don't need to show me excessive gore, blood splattering the wall, and all these horrific images. You can absolutely give me a movie with a strong story, not necessarily AAA full cast actors, but if you give me a good, solid story with maybe one big actor or none, that the actor doesn't really make it. It's the story is what makes it.
This is why I had to give that Oculus film a shout out,
yes,
because that's
Oculus.
a movie where you don't even need a sequel, bro.
You don't.
Now I know
That is a
I
perfect
can't remember
example.
her name. The girl that was in Guardians of the Galaxy, Kieran. I think that's her last name. I'm not 100% sure. I think she's Scottish.
Oh, yeah,
But
she's
Jill. Oh yeah.
so
yeah.
she's the main character in Oculus,
That's
and the
the
brother
first
is
film I
kind
ever
of
seen her
like,
in.
you know what I mean? There wasn't too many super big names
it's
in
the
that movie.
Gillian or
Some,
something
yeah,
like
yeah, something to that
It's
effect.
with a G,
But what a
I,
great, what a
or
great
something.
movie, and
Yeah.
you don't even need a sequel. Complete idea from beginning to end. Good pacing,
Yes.
good story.
100%.
Told me everything I needed to know. Perfect. Like I
They-
think Oculus
and-
is extremely underrated.
Very good film.
Karen Gillan.
Yeah. So that is a great example. That is a film I watched time and time again.
No
I've always-
A-listers.
No A-listers. And at the time, we didn't know. Now, and it's funny because people watch Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that, and I'm like, I know her from Oculus.
Most people didn't even recognize her
'Cause of
because
the
she's
makeup.
Yeah, no hair, makeup, completely.
Like, I guess,
And
I
think
guess
she's in was it?
Jungle Book. Or,
No.
Jumanji.
Oh, yeah,
Jumanji.
Jumanji. There you go. Jungle Book, Jumanji. It's all J's. But yeah,
yeah,
Jumanji as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
perfect
that's
example.
great example. Like the single movies, or like, okay, I got a huge list and I could easily go on for a month, but I won't. Guys, Room 1408. Room 1408.
that was the Shining sequel, right?
No.
No, oh no, that
That's
one was
Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep.
Also a good.
But I do think that movie that he just spoke of is a Stephen King book.
Not even that.
No, it's not.
No, I think
it's
I believe there's one. There is.
Well, here's what I was going to say. So, Room 1408, for those that don't know, is actually based on a short story, not even a full-blown book, which I have
Interesting.
read, and it's very interesting. But as interesting as that short story is, the film strongly expounds on that. It has basically just like a Night Swim. It's filmed in one location. It's focused on one guy, and you're locked in a room. And at first glance, it's like, that doesn't sound very entertaining. No setting, one guy. How entertaining can this movie be? No, 1408 is a roller coaster ride. It just gets worse and worse and worse for this guy. And you're like, and it's funny because 1408's been out for a long time now. So if you go
that one
see
was
it.
like mid 2000s.
Yeah, I want to say so.
Yeah.
The guy gets locked. He gets locked in a room. Story by Stephen King. Yes, it is a story by Stephen, but it's a short story. It's not. It's not a big book by any
Right.
imagination. But what I like about it is he goes in. The guy's a skeptic, and he's like, "I'll stay in your hotel." This I've been in haunted houses. It's whatever. And he goes in, and it just gets worse and worse. And by the end, he is a believer. But it doesn't stop there. The movie ends, and the audience gets a nice little scene. And when the movie ends, you're wondering, was it real? And if you watch the behind the scenes, there is a alternate ending. Some might argue that's what they should have put in, but 141 or Room 1408 is one of my favorites.
Buttons, what do you got to follow up with that?
So, I mean, I think that I wouldn't be able to tell you like one movie that's like my favorite or anything like that. I mean,
Same.
I kind of break it down into what I consider classic, what I consider modern, and then of course my comedy horrors. So, I mean, and again, I love comedies, and if you can do it in a way where I'm scared and laughing in the next scene, and in such a way that that's balanced,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to enjoy it. I mentioned Happy Death Day, Scream, Army of the Dead, Cabin in the Woods,
Yep.
Drag Me to Hell. I mean, these are movies. Chucky. I mean, you can watch Chucky. You can watch the Leprechaun movies.
Yeah.
And now they're not all intending to be comedy, but they just are.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Like
but-
balance of levity there.
Right, but I mean, you have these other movies, and I'm probably like you. I tend to be more terrified of the paranormal kind of movies where they, like I said, I mentioned Insidious, Conjuring, Amityville Horror. I mean, it's ghosts, it's poltergeists, it's that kind of stuff. But I do again think that we have that. We always are going to have that strong connection to these movies that are real life based movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Aspect of realism.
Yeah, and
Hills Have Eyes.
Hills Have Eyes, like you get into that realism, and that to me can be even more scary. Cabin Fever. Okay, that movie when it came out, I remember after watching that one, sitting there going, "Oh, hell!" Like that would be truly terrifying to find myself into that situation.
Right.
And Silence of the Lambs.
Oh.
I don't think any one of us mentioned that one yet.
Jacob's
but,
Ladder.
Jacob's Ladder's another good one.
This podcast got dark all of a sudden.
But I mean, some of these ones, they have a bit of realism in them, and they make it that much more terrifying because there is that like, oh, this does seem believable. This does seem like something
Yeah.
that could happen. I mean, even if you look at like
28 Days Later.
that's on my
Dawn of the
list
Dead.
right here. That's on my list. I mean, like
Great.
fast, scary zombies. Okay, that
they're running
got
after
my
me now.
blood pumping. I think 28 Days Later is a wonderful horror movie. If you
Yes.
have not seen it and you
Yes.
want to see a zombie movie, like that one will make you crap your pants.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to add on to that is just last week, 28 years later was
Oh,
just announced
nice.
in production. Yeah, so for those that don't know, a while back, 28 Days, 28 Weeks Later are one of my favorites. I'm glad that you brought them up. Back then, they actually rumored 28 months later. And yeah, it was actually in the works for a while, and for whatever reason, it just never happened. There have been some, I've been reading the forums online, reading on Reddit and stuff. People are kind of saying what Neff and I have said in the past about sequels. If you're going to do a sequel, you have a window. I worry that maybe it's too long. Because we went from 28 days to 28 weeks. It was supposed to be 28 months. No, we're just going to go to 28. So you're going to tell me in 28 years y'all didn't get a handle on this pandemic? y'all didn't figure it out? You know
Well,
what I mean?
maybe-
Like, I'll still watch it. Don't get me wrong. but that kind of breaks the immersion, especially now with 2020. I think we can all agree that, well, okay, we can't relate to turning in 12 seconds, but we can,
Relate to a pandemic
a witch
situation,
hunt,
things
like,
locked
are
down.
you infected? Or no, are you infected? You coughed. Oh, I have allergies. Nope, he's infected. He's got COVID. Horrifying. And I think if 28 months or 28 years comes out later, I think that might get people,
They could spin that
they could spin that.
because it's relatable now. A
Exactly.
little extreme, but relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, it's great when you see some of these older films finally get their sequels. Like you get excited for it. It might have been years before you saw something from that franchise, and then all of a sudden it pops up, and you're like, "Ooh, what are they gonna do?"
Right,
And
sure.
you get excited. Especially like Scream is a perfect example for me. There was a pretty big gap between. What was it, 4 and
3.
5?
I think it was a gap between 3 and 4.
Oh, was there a gap between 3 and 4? Okay, well, either way, there was a pretty big, sizable
I think there was a
gap.
gap between 4 and 5, if I'm being honest.
Because
There
we're talking the 90s and early
Well,
2000s. Like,
they-
there was a huge.
they
I
just
think
did
there was a gap
6,
between
right?
3 and 4, and then a gap between 4 and 5. 5 and 6 kind of came out relatively
Yeah,
close
they
together,
were
but there was a
close
couple
together.
gaps. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so that's why I thought maybe it was just between 4 and 5. But regardless, all of those things, you want to see what they bring out. I mean, another good example of movies that seem like they were out of their time frame would have been the Sixth Sense movies. So those are a trilogy for, or actually, no, there's 4, isn't there?
no, there's only one Sixth Sense.
No, I'm talking about the universe that they created. So
I
you
don't know
had-
what M. Night did.
Okay,
M. Night's all over the place.
he is.
You know
but
I'm not
that's
a fan
different-
of him.
But that's a different thing. But they all within the same universe.
So
they
Sixth
wrap
Sense and
them
Signs
together.
are in the same universe?
No. So these are the movies that are all within the same. Okay, so Sixth Sense was the first one.
Okay,
Then you had Unbreakable.
okay.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah.
Oh, you're no,
Sixth Sense, they got nothing to do with
no,
Unbreakable.
that's
No.
what I-
Unbreakable
that's
and
what I got mixed up.
Glasses.
It's Unbreakable. So Unbreakable
Right.
came out first.
Right.
Unbreakable, I got them mixed up because they're both Bruce Willis.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
Unbreakable was first. Then you had Split, and there was a huge gap between Unbreakable and Split, and then Glass.
Right.
And that was the trilogy there.
Right.
And there was you liked these characters, especially from Unbreakable. They introduced and they kept the same. I mean, you had Bruce Willis, and he is in that one, and he is in Glass. And I think he even made like a little cameo in Split, just to kind of tie it to say like, hey, we're in the same universe together.
I think at the end he might have.
Yeah, it was like at the very end, I think he kind of popped up randomly. But when Split was first introduced, you had no idea that it was connected until the very end. And in that sense, I think that it was a positive because you didn't even realize it could stand on its own. You didn't even realize it was tied until the very end.
Right.
And Unbreakable, of course, was one of his earlier films. And so when you're introduced to the characters there, you're like, oh man, this is trippy, this is wild the way that it works. So then when Glass comes out, and there's such a huge time gap between those movies, it almost feels like they waited too long to do it. And even though he was able to tie it together, it definitely, in my opinion, would have been better if they had been closer together.
Makes sense. That makes sense. You want to have that continuity and just time and the actual.
The
I guess what I'm
interest, though.
exactly. You want to hit it when it's a good amount of time in between, just like we talked about with Rebel One. How long do they have to put out that second part? Because if they wait too long, people will forget about it. They already. I would say the majority of people that I've seen talk about it, they're not fans of it. So if you let that linger around too long and you don't put out part 2 so people can get that and digest it, and maybe it could change their perspective on the first part, they'll be like, oh, well, I'm not interested. I didn't like part 1. I'm not watching this.
Relevancy. You gotta stay relevant, and if
While the iron's
you
hot.
if you wait too long,
Done.
you're gonna lose the
We
people.
talked about a lot of movies
Yeah.
being out of their time.
It's
like it'd be great, but if it's out of its time, might not do that good. Matrix.
And of course, Kage mentioned, of course, when you have these repeat characters like Freddy and Jason, it doesn't matter how much time elapses in between them because it's purely conditional on the group of people. they don't change. They're stagnant
And-
characters. There's nothing, they wear a mask. Who cares? Like, if it's been 40 years
Well, I was
since
gonna
the
say,
last
they're
time we saw.
demons, they're undead, and
Well-
that's why you can get away with that,
Right.
because you can just find somebody else who's 6'5" or whatever to play
Exactly.
Jason. You're not gonna know, and again, you don't care who the actor is. All you care about is what's gonna happen to these dumb teenagers for having sex in the woods.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what you're getting with those films. Kind of tying it back a little bit to when we were talking about sequels. When I mentioned Room 1408, I was using that as an example of a one film.
That just could have been on its own and fine.
And that's what I mean. I don't need, speaking for myself, and tell me what you guys think, like, I don't need a million films for a horror franchise. My exception are the Boogeyman films. Okay, not literally the Boogeyman movie, but I'm talking about like Boogeyman films where you have a monster
Right.
pursuing people.
Right.
Like those you can get away with. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween. You can get away with having bunch of like, and honestly, it's part of American culture, I think, at this point. We're always going to have Batman. We're always going to have a Jason movie. We're always like every whatever years. So I think it's important to American culture, pop culture,
Right.
to have that, to keep that. But those one-offs, man, those are gems.
Yeah, man.
of
Especially when they
films.
knock it out the park.
Exactly. So like 1408, filmed in one room. John Cusack, starring John Cusack
Yeah.
and Samuel L. Jackson. That was it.
Yep.
That's all you needed. And Samuel L. Jackson wasn't in the movie very much, but damn, his presence was felt.
Impactful.
Very impactful.
Let's
We
switch
need more
over
of
now. Good point. Let's switch over now to shows, horror shows.
Yes.
I'll start with Buttons.
Okay, so we're talking about horror shows now.
Yeah.
I gotta bring up a couple of my favorites.
Bring up like 3 or 4 for us.
Okay, so obviously one of the ones that Neff is going to know about, and he did bring up earlier, which would have been the Haunting of Hill House, which did have Haunting of Bly Manor.
Yep.
That was kind of its spin-off, was not as well received, and in my opinion, was not as scary as...
It wasn't.
I feel personally that the first one, that's a gem. Mwah, beautiful. Very, very few things that I did not enjoy about that show. And that was one of those ones that, it jumped around a little bit. So for people who, don't like the whole jumping from past to present, this one's probably not going to want to be one of your favorites in your wheelhouse to watch. But for anybody who just likes a good... haunted house, that is definitely this one. There's also some of the other ones that we talked about, or that have been mentioned, which is foreign films. And we talked about Marianne briefly as one of Netflix's unfortunate,
Casualties.
one and done chopping block,
Yeah.
one season and that was it. And I feel like they could have kept going on with
Marianne was
that
great.
story. Marianne was just, it was so simple, like the premise of it was so simple, but it was truly terrifying. And the way that the director took the different scenes, and again, there was so much realism in it. There was so much just like believability of like, yeah, this is normal, this is how people would act, and what's going on here, and then you're just like, oh, what the hell is going on here?
Right. Marianne's great.
And it's dark and it's gritty and it just feels so, like, if I could describe it in a way that would make you understand, it would be that, there are certain movies and shows and things that you watch that you feel it in your bones. Like, up on the screen, you're watching it and then it gives you those chills because it's just like, ooh, it gets to you on like a deeper level. And Marianne was that one for sure for me. And then probably if I was going to name like a third one, as far as a horror TV show, I watched some that I guess it wouldn't typically be considered horror. I guess it might fall a little bit more in like a suspense. Archive 81 has definitely got those elements to it where you're kind of like, is it a horror? Is it more of a suspense? Is this kind of it's definitely supernatural related.
Yep.
So as you're watching it, you're not sure even what you're watching because you're just like, oh, some weird stuff is going on, and you're like piecing it together as the show goes on. And again, Netflix, why must you chop,
The good
the
stuff
shows?
away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Great shows.
and I feel like, if they were able to sit down with their audience more and say like, hey, and of course, because they don't really have a rating system. The way that traditional TV did. You could sit there and you could get your ratings based off of how many people were tuned into your channel when your show was on. Netflix doesn't really have that. They have like how many people spent how many hours watching this show. And it's like if the show doesn't get enough promotion, enough visibility out there, then of course nobody's going to watch it. And Netflix with their dumps of tons of content, especially at the time that Marianne came out, they had flooded the platform with tons of content. So I feel like it got ignored, it got left behind, and in favor of freaking Tiger King or something, not that Tiger King was its competition, because I think Tiger King came out a couple years afterwards.
Right.
But my point being is, if you have so much content out there that people don't get a chance to see it, then they're not going to watch it because they don't know it's there.
Right. Kage, do you have any shows that pop up for you? Streaming
Yeah,
services wise?
I got a lot, but
Let's hear some, dude.
well, like I might get some flack for this. I love The Walking Dead. I'm a huge Walking Dead fan. Now, don't get it twisted. I'm not talking about fear or anything. Didn't like it. I feel like the entire first season was crap because the first pilot episode of Walking Dead had me at the edge of my seat more than the entire first season of Fear. That's just my opinion. But it's not so much a show about zombie. It's a show about the human condition, about survival. Growing myself, I've been in hurricanes. I grew up in Florida. I understand being without power, like survivalist type things. So it kind of relates in that light regard. Obviously, I haven't had any experience fighting the dead, but yeah, like so Walking Dead, that's one. American Horror Story was a great time when I was in college. Watched a lot of that. Hemlock Grove on Netflix. Loved that. I have watched that entire series probably a few times now.
I'm going to have to check that out.
I tried to get into it. I was not able to get into that.
Give us some insight on that,
The
Kage.
first, I think it was like the
Slow burn?
first episode. No.
Go straight into it?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does go
It
straight
is
into it.
basically, okay, forgive me, fans out there, if you're diehard fans. I haven't seen it in a while, might butcher some stuff, but the gist is it's about vampires and werewolves, and I'm not talking Twilight. It's very brutal, not for kids.
More like Underworld?
No, more like
No.
out in the open. We're not hiding anything. It's very disgusting, very
Nice.
violent, not for kids. But it's very good. You got a small town, middle town, mid-America type thing, and people are dying off left and right. And there is a werewolf that's killing people, okay? But there's also a race of vampires called the Umpire, I think is what it was. And they've been doing their thing for a long time, but they have science behind it. They talk about the medical condition, and it's like these two, it's not like Underworld where they've been at it for centuries and stuff like that, but it's just got a good drama and people trying to hide what they are, and obviously that doesn't go very well. there's a lot of death on both sides. That's all I can say. It's a very,
Interesting.
very good show. And if the first episode doesn't get you, then you're not going to like it.
Okay.
The first episode lets you know up front, hey, this is what we're offering. And all I got to say is that first werewolf transformation, I was like, okay, I need to know more. Tell me
Yeah,
more.
I'm in.
I'm on board. I have my box of popcorn. Let's go. I guess here's a good one. All of Us Are Dead on Netflix, a Korean one. It's like a zombie.
I did
it's like
watch
a zo-
that one. I
I've seen a
enjoyed
few
that.
episodes. I was like, Korea, stepping it up again. Korea's killing it on Netflix, folks. Go watch that show. Go watch a lot of Korean shows on Netflix. Free endorsement. I would say this one, this is kind of a vague one. Last of Us on Max.
Yep.
Some would argue that's more post-apocalyptic drama,
Right.
more than horror. It definitely has some horror aspects of it. Definitely encourage people to go check that out. And then I just have to say something for nostalgia's sake. What started my horror journey? Because this episode's big for me. Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps?
Yep. Agree.
I used to love that crap back in 1994.
Yeah.
And I've only rolled with it since then.
And you know, one of the things that, since you bring up the whole nostalgia factor, something I didn't take into consideration was X-Files.
Oh, yes.
Which, you know, some could argue that it's not truly horror, but, you know, more of just a drama and suspense show. But there were several episodes I remember
there were
of
some
the
creepy
X-Files
ones.
that had some very
dark
scary,
stuff.
yeah.
Yes.
And as a kid, you know, you go sit down and you watch something like that in the dark, and you're gonna have some nightmares. So you know, and X-Files always came on at night. So
Yeah, loved X-Files. But yeah, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Awesome stuff.
And you know, kind of a closing statement I would say about between film and shows. The best horror shows, the best horror content is not necessarily, at least for me, not the most bloody, gory, in your
Right,
face.
right.
I'm all about less is more. I'm all about psychological, those slow burn movies. A24, those movies are great examples. The Ritual on Netflix.
Yep.
Midsummer, that one's dark even for me, because
Yeah.
that's a slow burn. But by the time you get to the end of that, you're like,
Whoa.
yeah. Or what movie did we see? The what was it?
Recently?
Very recent. The girl getting her head.
Oh, Hereditary.
Hereditary.
I was
yes.
gonna say I mentioned Hereditary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That one,
Yeah.
that one snuck up on me. I was like, man, this movie.
I
is
told you, give it another
slow.
shot.
I said, this movie is really
Let's
slow,
say,
and then I
get
sat
there.
down and watched it. I'm like, oh, wow, oh,
By the
jeez.
end, you're just like, oh
And
my
that's what I'm
gosh.
saying. Those are my favorite shows. My favorite type of thing in horror, the paranormal horror, where you have a good origin story, something that stays with you, something that doesn't have excessive gore, but it has good lore to it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But underlining all of that, if you tell me something, whether show or movie, if you tell me something is based on a true story, you got me.
You're in there.
You got me. Because
You're
now,
interested.
Hook, line, and sinker.
because now I'm on Wikipedia, I'm on Reddit. Okay, what really?
Doing research.
What happened?
Yeah.
Doing research with. Here's a good one. The Fourth Kind.
Okay.
Fourth Kind was advertised as a found film documentary reenactment thing. They said it was based on a true story. You better believe I was online looking
to
up
figure
who
it out.
Abigail Tyler is and what
Yeah.
happened. Did she ever get her kids back? Like what? And they said all the names are changed. And my question to this day, was that all BS?
Yeah, man. Scream is based on real murders.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
Cool.
In Florida. But no, seriously, in Florida.
Why is
that
it
really
always
happened.
Florida?
That happened in Florida. And then another piece of trivia for you, it was originally titled Scary Movie. So that's why it makes
Yeah.
the Scary Movie even
Yeah.
funnier. It's like, oh, the parody of the movie called Scary Movie, now it's Scream. But anyway,
I have so many questions.
to cut through, I'm glad we brought up X-Files again, because I just put X-Files in the category of outside of horror as a show, it's like
Right.
really a good show that holds up. Like I said, I can go on Hulu right now and binge watch X-Files, and I won't feel like, oh, this is old, this is boring. Like, no, it's written well. It's probably when I think me and Buttons have had this talk about the golden age of TV shows in general. I think I said it was like the 90s. Some people will, defer, usually older generation. It depends on your generation. But I feel like the 90s had probably the balance, the most balance of all just high quality television
Yes.
shows all around the board.
Agreed.
But yeah. Anything else, guys? I think we covered a lot here. You have anything else, Kage? Another show you want to throw in, Buttons? I agreed with Buttons' list and Kage's list. We all like the same horror shows. They're solid. They hold up. If nobody's seen them or haven't given them a shot, you guys should go look at those, especially Marianne, Archive 81, Hemlock Grove. Give that a shot.
I think Hemlock Grove, I hope I'm wrong. I think they took it off Netflix.
I'd have to look because
I think they took, well, just because it's been on forever. It was a heavy hitting
okay.
show. They actually kept it on there
a
because it
while.
was so popular, and they took it down. I hope they bring it back.
Okay.
If it comes out on anything, or if you can rent it, or I highly recommend go check it out.
But All of Us Are Dead is another good
Solid.
Yes.
Netflix one.
Yes.
So if you are
Good.
looking
That is up
for-
there right now,
If you're
folks.
looking for a zombie show because you've lost your Last of Us and
I need to watch
and
that too.
Walking Dead, and you're not into the new Daryl Dixon, spinoff that they have.
Right. They
then
do
go
have that
ahead.
coming
Yeah.
out. Yep.
I think it's called Dead City, starring the actor. What is it? The characters Maggie and Negan.
Yeah, Negan. and
This
so-
is on AMC.
But I don't know
crap,
if you
the
can
one with
watch
m-
them on Hulu or not, or
can't?
Netflix. I'm saying I'm not sure if you can or can't. I feel like Hulu had The Walking Dead.
I feel like I know Netflix has Walking Dead, but I could have swore that Hulu actually had everything
And
Walking
Hulu
Dead
might,
related.
that's what I'm
I
saying,
feel
they
like it
might
should
have
because it
all
has
that.
Fear, or at least it did when I had it. I remember.
But one thing I just will, since we were trying to wrap this up real quick, I will say, go watch those shows. Let us know what your favorite shows are.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, we talked about the movies that we're looking forward to, so I'm sure we'll cover those in later episodes, the ones that we do see, because they're kind of spread out throughout the year. Unfortunately, it's not like we'll have them all in 1 month.
Yeah.
But so we'll touch on those because we all love the horror films and the franchises and all that. But I'll pass it back to Kage for the final word.
Yeah, all I can say is, guys, we talked about a lot of great shows and movies, but please just tell us, what are your favorites? What do you want to see? And just not just in horror, but anything. We love to hear your guys' feedback. Let's get a discussion going. But I think that's all I'm going to say to wrap this up. I am Kage. Stay scared, everybody. Neff.
Yep.
We got Buttons. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night. Sleep tight.
Be safe.